Greetings and welcome to the Cerebral Women Art Talks podcast. I'm Phyllis Hollis, your host. As an extension of my Instagram page, Cerebral Women, this podcast offers insights into the visual art world. I interview artists, mainly artists of color and female artists who will freely articulate what inspires their creativity. In addition, you'll hear interesting perspectives from dedicated art professionals who work with artists and the art institutions that feature them. I'm confident that collectively, these individuals will indeed stimulate your mind as they do our eyes. Please know these interviews are conducted in my Manhattan apartment, so please forgive the background sounds of city life. Welcome to the Cerebral Women Art Talks podcast. This episode features Jacob Mason-Macklin. He lives and works in Queens, New York. Jake graduated from the Columbus College of Art and Design in 2017, and he is an alumnus of the Yale-Norfolk Summer School of Art and the Skowhegan School of Painting and Sculpture. In 2021-22, he was an artist in residence at the Student Museum in Harlem, New York. Recent exhibitions include Underground at Mamoth Gallery in London in 23, The Future Won't Be Long Now at Someday, Lower Manhattan, New York, also in 2023, and It's Time for Me to Go at MOMA PS1 Long Island City in 2022-23. A dou-exhibition with artist Ryan Huggins at Pace Gallery in New York was in 2021. In 2020, he exhibited at the Interstate projects in Brooklyn, New York, and No Place Gallery in Columbus, Ohio, to name a few. Enjoy this episode featuring Jake Mason-Macklin. Welcome, Jake. It's a pleasure to feature you.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to chat. Very excited to be on the podcast.
Thank you. So let's start with, when did you realize that you were going to become a painter?
I realized this following Skowhegan. I attended Skowhegan in 2019. I've been making work prior, and the work I was making was always in conversation with painting, but it was installation, site-specific type of sculpture. It was really influenced by happenings and even like the Art Povera movement of the 60s and 70s. And so I wasn't really painting when I got to New York City, and I wasn't painting much when I was in college. I was using painting, but I was really interested in found materials. And so I think when I got to Skowhegan, you're in the woods and it's a very limited way of working. And I think the only things I had brought with me were some paints that I had kept around in my apartment. And I really figured out a language that I wanted to use through paint, and I've just been running with it since. So I would say within the last 5 years, I really started taking it seriously, painting proper, like on the rectangle, stretch linen, very sort of traditional modes of oil painting.
Was there a particular artist or work of art that influenced you early on?
Oh my gosh. Yes. I'd say I'm an unabashed fan of de Kooning. De Kooning is my first influence. And I feel like I've always tried, which is funny because my work doesn't really reflect his very much. Maybe more so now is the work I'm making now. It's a bit more expressive, abstract, but really my first influence was de Kooning. And then I can remember when I got to college, my junior and senior year, once I had a professor, his name's Tim Rietenbach, who fortunately is now, I'm able to be a family friend. His son and I are quite close, and he taught me at CCAD, the Columbus College of Art and Design, but he was my professor up until my thesis year, and he introduced me to David Hammond. And once I learned about David Hammond, it was really hard to shake. Just his methodology, the way he carries himself in his practice, his use of material, the way he thinks, that became my influence. And so I think those two really come to mind. And then now, I'm not really looking at much work now, but when I have time, I'm really, it's hard for me to shake the German painters like the Frankfurt School. I look at Kippenberger, Erlin, and Richter, although Richter's a bit earlier than these people. I'm really looking at German painting because I find some sort of kinship, and I have some of my own questions about it as the methodology. But yeah, I think those are three types of influences throughout my artistic practice.
And how do you define your practice?
That's a good question. My practice is I am an oil painter that works through concepts. And what I mean by that is my visual language is informed by the idea that I wish to express. And so my work often visually jumps, which is not necessarily a self-proclaimed adjective to describe my practice. I think when people talk to me, they're like, oh my goodness, like from one show to the next, it's a different kind of painting. And I always say, yeah, the paintings are in service to the ideas. So I would say without, making too short of a category, I think I'm an oil painter that works through concepts. And painting is the medium in which I use.
So do you lean more towards figuration or abstraction?
Goodness. I would say, if I'm earnest, I would say that I am engaged with the figure. I really find importance in it as a motif. I think more accurately is I'm in conflict always with these sort of dual sensibilities I have toward this very sort of painterly gestural abstraction or mark making that for the most part in my public career, my public practice or what I exhibit has been latent. It seems most of my abstractions exist in the studio or during my incubation period between presenting work. But the show in London, I was in a new environment and there was different psychological underpinnings to my time there. It was my first time out of the country for a sustained amount of time. And I felt a certain freedom to express, well, who am I in this space that I'm not really recognized? I was in a space, not very many people knew me in London. And so I was like, let's present this more sort of latent urge. And so I guess to answer the question more succinctly, I toe the line. I think it's towing the line between this sensibility toward the figure and then also to disrupt it and extract from it. And I think honestly, as I'm thinking about the work I'm making now, it really is about, the image. And we can get into that to a later question. But yeah, I think for concision, I'm always in conflict between the sort of representational image and an abstracted image.
Are there connections? Are there concepts or thoughts that connect your work?
Yeah, I would say so. I would say most recently, so I'm from the Midwest, I'm from the Rust Belt. And I think that in a lot of ways, my work was referential to Ohio, Columbus, Ohio, in a way that felt very proximate, as in I was living there and I was making work. So I think it just oozed out of the work, this sort of Midwestern sensibility. And when I got to New York, obviously I had some distance, but I kept thinking about it more in a memory sense. And so these forms started to arrive in each sort of body of work of mine. And I think more recently I've kind of maintained this idea of making work about this sort of integration between the subject or the self, a body, a form, and an auto body sort of mechanism. Some type of machinery. And I think for me, that started very nascently in 2021. And then when I was at the Studio Museum, I was making this painting whose shorthand title is Cudelice, but I think the long form is Spring Piston Exigency. And so it's a composite image. So it's a portrait of multiple people. One is a personal photograph kind of fused with a celebrity that I like. And I keep it hidden because I want to keep the mystery, but it's this portrait, this composite image of this woman. And behind her is this motor. And it was at PS1 and I didn't know why I made it. It took me the longest time because I was like, I don't know what I was like, it feels good. I do not know what. And from that painting, I drew my line in the sand of like, okay, so this synthesis of the body and the auto body, I was like, that feels like that is my conduit. Like that is my connecting thread. And so I've been just running with that since.
How did your art professors impact your work?
Oh my gosh. I went to a very small art school. I did not go to like a RISD or a MICA. I went to a very small school in my hometown. And I was fortunate for the experience of the professors that I had. So I mentioned Tim Rietenbach, and also I think someone that comes to mind is my professor, former professor, and now my friend Carmen Wynant, who is a fantastic artist. She's actually going to be in the Whitney Biennial this year. So I'm like, that was extra special to hear. And her work is photo-based, but collage, installation, and just the way that she influenced me in particular is her rigor and the way she conceptualizes ideas and then visualizes them. I really was on board. When I first met her as a student, the way she talked about work, the artists that she introduced me to, and I think even her practice itself, I found very impactful, and I still do. And so I would say my professors gave me the conceptual framework, which is funny. Tim is a painter as well, but he's also a sculptor, installation, and he's a conceptual artist. Carmen's work is extremely conceptual. And so I think they gave me the framework of how to think as an artist. And then I kind of put that into my sensibilities, which happened to be painting. I felt most closely tied to.
I love that. When do you know work is finished?
I don't. That is a great question because I think every artist I've asked or every time an artist has asked, and it's a very like woo-woo answer. Actually, I'm going to borrow a quote from Guston, and to paraphrase, it's you see it. And I know that sounds almost trite or like very like curt, but it's really about the work for, and this is more my thinking, the work for 99% of its sort of making is all form for me personally. It is brushstroke, color, value. It's all these sort of formal concerns. And eventually either they're satisfied on a good day, but more than likely it's okay. I have reached a point where I don't know what else to do, but hopefully in that moment, you begin to see what it is you're trying to do. And it's not a one-to-one. It's not an indexical sort of like what I imagined is now on canvas. But there is a sort of knowing that happens and the painting unfolds and you're like, okay, I see where I was going. And that moment can be overlooked, but I try not to. And that's when you start overworking and it has to go to a different stage of completion. But I think it's once you see it and the sort of worldly devices, like the socio-political, all these sort of concerns that we place on work in a non-formal way, all these things, they become imbued in the work and it begins to have a different meaning. But I really think it starts when there's that moment where you're like, okay, I see what I did. That's when I think it's done. If you can catch that moment, that's a blissful day in the studio.
Well, and the titles of the work, when does that enter the creative process?
I think when the work is at that point where I see it, I'm like, that's what the title is. Inversely, sometimes I find a title immediately and I make a work for it. And then the title might loosely change. Like, I think, so when I was in LA, I was invited by my dear friend Chase Johnson, and he and his family and I went to the SoFi Stadium to hear Khalil Kinsey of the Kinsey Foundation. He did a tour because the foundation has they have the entire base floor of the SoFi Stadium, and there's an exhibition of parts of their collection. And towards the end, there is this playbill that they have, and it's the Song of Freedom. And I was like, ooh. I was like, what a title. And so like, I just wrote this in my notes app. I was like, the Song of Freedom is an engine motor running. And I was like, oh, that's I don't know if and so from then that just made me think of a painting to make. And so sometimes it happens where the painting is unnamed and it gets its name through its completion. But other times it feels maybe more conventional to, I'm listening to a song or something like I just expressed, like I see a phrase or I'm like, ooh, that has some profundity. Like that is a painting. What would that look like? What would those words look like as a painting?
So if you weren't a visual artist, what career path do you think you would have chosen?
Oh my goodness. I never got that far. I like, it really was, it was artist or bust. I never had aspirations of being a fireman or a lawyer or a doctor. And so thank God I found the arts in a sort of practical way, because I was just like, I'm just going to be laboring and painting. And so I was even committed to the idea, even when I was in New York, So I did not come to New York with a career. And I didn't really come to New York with I had a very strong sense of what I wanted to do. I didn't necessarily know how to get there. I knew I wanted to get there not quickly. I wanted to get there very boldly. I mean, I was just almost incisive, but it was still murky. And so I was like, I'm just going to work a job and paint. And I thought that was going to be my life. And I had made my bed with that very early. And so, yeah, it was artist or bust.
Do you listen to music while you're working?
Definitely. Yes. And I'll be candid. I listen to primarily love songs in the studio. It just gets me to the sort of particular base emotional climate I want. I want to feel that. It's either like this sort of libidinal impulse or maybe even like a yearning, a pining. I think those are good operative emotions to paint from. And so I'm usually listening to love songs. I try jazz or like Philip Glass. Like I try the minimalist. I try the more heady stuff, but I think really for me, I connect with like either a Motown love song. I mean, I play a lot of Marvin Gaye in the studio and also more current like R&B. Yeah, really just love songs primarily, oddly enough.
Yeah, no, I can relate to that. What are you excited about right now?
I'm excited about the work. To say I'm excited about the work seems topical, but I am. I think that for the last 2 years, I've been in residence. So I was in Harlem for the duration of that residency, and that was extremely impactful. And that kind of broke things open for me conceptually. And also, I think in a strange way, well, not that it's strange, but it gave me a whole new audience that I was not accustomed to, but thankful for. And then I had this moment where I was like, I need to incubate further. So I went to do this residency in London with Mamoth Gallery, and I made even more sort of experimental work. And so now I feel like I've made a mess for the last 2 years, conceptually, visually. I broadcasted them, my train of thought. And then now I feel the logic behind what I was searching for a bit. And so I've been painting like a madman. In between traveling, I've been in the studio and making this new work. It has somewhere to be loosely, but it really is existing in the studio right now. And so mining those ideas and the visual forms, it does give me excitement when I wake up where I'm like, okay, I get to make these paintings. Yeah, at the top of my mind, I think that's what I'm most excited about.
And when you're creating, do you think about who your audience is?
I do. I find it, unfortunately, like begrudgingly, I think is a more accurate word. I do think about the audience. I think about it less so. And I think that's the beauty of continuing a practice is in a lot of ways, I've become less sophisticated where my impetus for making is very simple. It's because I want to. And so I've operated throughout my practice on a better to ask for forgiveness than permission type of mindset where, so like I'm really fascinated with images, needless to say. And so some images that I'm attracted to are sometimes lurid or questionable, or if on a cold read, be like, well, what is that? And so when I'm in the studio, I try my best to allow it to exist in that very raw form, and I will clean it up as I see fit. And smarten it is a very reductive kind of way of thinking, but what I think about is I slow down the read or the immediacy of the image. And so when I'm doing that, I do think of the audience, but more so now it's like, I think I'm letting things hang a bit more in the work. And so I feel like that is me being less considerate of, actually, it's me being less considerate of the audience and actually more considerate of the audience's ability to look at something and interpret it in more ways than surface sort of ideations. And so, yes, the short answer is I do think of my audience, but I try not to until the very last moments.
Do you feel Black art can be defined?
No, people do try very hard. And I think that's one of the issues. I think that we've gotten into this point where it would be a mistake to believe that we know what we're talking about, or like the audience knows what to expect when they see a painting from a Black artist. I think that's a very precarious, it's dubious. And I think that it can't be defined in a way where I think that there's a base common nexus point but there's multiple bases from that. I mean, there's the East Coast, there's the Midwest, there's the West Coast, and then now it's even a global sort of conversation. And so there's all these sort of conversations and histories surrounding Black art that now, as we have eschewed ourselves into a sort of new terrain, we're getting, into the new millennia. I feel like the concerns, the questions, the visual language, it's always transforming. And to put a lid on it would be a shame. And I think it's not doable, in my opinion. I think people try, and it's overly simplified in certain ways, especially because it's become quite lucrative. And I think that has tried to put a cap on something that is so many variants. I don't know. No, I think that in short, no.
Okay. I've enjoyed our conversation very much.
Likewise.
My final question is sort of two parts. So here it goes. What do you feel is the purpose of art? And as an artist, what is your role?
Oh, gosh. What is the purpose of art? I'm trying to figure that one out myself. I think the purpose of art is to, as effectively as possible, transmit an idea or a sensation. And I also think that segues into the role of the artist is to be that conduit and to challenge conventions. Is it Nina Simone that said something about the purpose of the artist is to reflect the times? I agree with that, but to try and put it more in my own words, I think the role of the artist is to challenge the conventions of what we're thinking about as a populace, what we're doing, what we're witnessing, how we talk, how we walk, how we dress. And it's a sort of conscientious observance of the world we live in. And I think that from that position, art is most powerful as a mirror. And I believe personally, that's what I try to do. I believe that is my purpose, is to transmit as effectively as possible how I think and feel and how I sense the world. And then my role is to be this conscientious observer of the world around me. And yeah, I believe that's how I feel.
Well, thank you for sharing that with us. I've enjoyed this conversation. It's been great.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for listening to Cerebral Women Art Talks podcast. For additional content, please visit cerebralwomen.com and be sure to follow Cerebral Women on Instagram.